Hi, I'm Nicola Miller and I am the co-founder of Teddington Trust, and we are a global charity that provide practical support and education for the xeroderma pigmentosum community, and we expand our work across a global community. I'm also the parent of a child who's now 10 but was diagnosed at 13 months with XP. And I'm really pleased to be joined today by Lachlan Hay, who's Director of Global Operations at CLINUVEL Pharmaceuticals Limited. To give you a bit of background as to why we're meeting today, in September 2020, CLINUVEL announced a launch of a new DNA repair development program, which we were very excited as a community to learn about. As part of this, they're planning a staged clinical process which looks to confirm whether a drug they have in existence can be repurposed for helping with DNA repair from damage caused by ultraviolet light, and whether that in turn might be something that we can benefit from as an XP community. Obviously, this caused a lot of interest when this was launched in our community, and we had lots of questions. So I'm really pleased to say that Lachlan and his team agreed to answer those questions for us, which is really wonderful. The questions that we're going to go through today have been submitted by our community, and they've come from all corners of the globe, from people with different interests, either as patients or family members. So we've got a really good mix of questions here. I would like to say that not all of the questions that were asked may be able to give a full answer to, because this is obviously still very much in development, but very kindly Lachlan and his team have agreed to be able to revisit this with us as the development goes on, which is really exciting. So that's where we are. So thank you very much, Lachlan, for joining us. And if you'd like to give us a bit of background before we dive into the questions, that would be fantastic.
Thanks, Nicola. And I'm really glad that we can have this conversation today. It's very much appreciated. I need to give you a couple of disclaimers, if I can, before we keep the conversation going. Firstly, I'm not medically qualified, and so as a result, some of the things that I say today really need to be taken in that context. It is not considered medical information. It really needs to be general information about the program and what it is that we're trying to achieve in this DNA repair program and working with XP patients and physicians. The other thing that I do need to say is that we are talking today about a drug which has been approved in some countries where I know you have audiences and members of Teddington Trust. So it does mean that there are certain things either we can't say or that we're a little bit restricted in terms of the program. With that proviso behind us, let's have a bit more background in terms of what is the product, what is the program, what is it that we're trying to achieve. The drug SCENESSE, or afamelanotide 16 milligram, is a product we've had in development for the last roughly 20 years. This is a product which is a controlled release, injectable, subcutaneous implant. That's really referring to the formulation, the way in which it's administered to a patient. The drug contains, or more to the point, that formulation contains a drug called afamelanotide. Afamelanotide is a peptide drug. It's a variation of a natural hormone that we all produce in our body.
So Lachlan, could you tell us a little bit about how that drug is currently being used?
SCENESSE, or afamelanotide 16 milligram, is a prescription product which has been approved for a disease called erythropoietic protoporphyria, or EPP. It's a distinct disorder from XP, and I have a feeling most of the families living with XP would have some understanding of EPP. The way the drug works is it's injected as a subcutaneous controlled release implant into the fatty tissue just above the hip. And after about 2 to 3 days, patients will see that their eumelanin, the pigment in their skin, increases and their skin darkens. Now, melanin has a few different roles in the body, and in this particular instance, we think about it as acting like an umbrella over a skin cell, protecting the cell by reflecting, refracting, and absorbing the wavelengths of light. Now, in EPP, patients have a phototoxic reaction to certain wavelengths of light, and so the drug will provide protection, make sure that the light can't penetrate through and cause those reactions. We also know that it has an antioxidant and anti-inflammatory effect, which has a downstream impact on EPP and phototoxic reactions. Now, in terms of the way that the product has been used, we have approval for this drug in Europe and the US, and it's available only by prescription for EPP patients. So we've not used the drug in a large number of xeroderma pigmentosum patients.
Thank you, Lachlan. That was so interesting and really a really good background to the where we are. Let's dive into the questions. And first off, we're going to start with some very general questions. And I should say that these are generated from people having read your press releases and looking at your website. So some of them come from there. So first question is, what exactly does hormone acting on various organs mean?
Sure. So this is a quote from one of the company announcements that we released as part of the program. Hormones are considered chemical messengers within the body, and when they're carried around by the bloodstream or in the bloodstream, they can then arrive at various tissues and cells, various organs throughout the body. As a result, they can then act on those cells, act on those tissues, and exert effects or have particular effects, interaction between the hormone, or in this case, a drug, which is a variation of a hormone, and the cells within those organs.
We know that the drug stimulates growth and change in the skin, such as freckles and moles, but how do you know that in very skin cancer prone XP skin, it won't turn the moles and XP freckles into skin cancer? Really important question, actually.
Yeah, and it's a good question, and it's one that we do get asked a lot, not just from XP patients, but from other patients who receive the drug as well. The focus for us as a company, whenever we administer a drug to a patient, is on safety and making sure that the patient receiving that product is not put at risk. In terms of afamelanotide, we have used this drug for more than 20 years, and there have been more than 10,000 doses of the drug administered to more than 1,400 patients. If we believe that the drug caused skin cancer, if the evidence showed that the drug may cause skin cancer, we wouldn't be using it in xeroderma pigmentosum patients. But the question is valid. Now, what we do see in patients, some patients, not all, receiving the drug, is that they will experience some darkening of certain areas of skin. So freckles may appear darker, moles may appear darker, but this is something that generally is resolved after the drug is stopped within the system. So a patient withdraws from the treatment, then those freckles or those moles will go back to their original color.
Fantastic, thank you. And actually timing and length of treatment is a question we're going to come on to, so that's really interesting to know. Okay, is there currently an age restriction in the use of the drug with EPP patients that are having it?
Yeah, absolutely. So, and this varies from region to region, but what I will say is that at this point in time, there is no approval for the product for any patient under the age of 18 years, which I know is frustrating, particularly for XP patients where this disease has a horrific impact from a very young age. We as a company have committed to developing a pediatric dose of afamelanotide for EPP patients. I can't say at the moment whether that's something that we would also be able to use in XP patients. It's far too early in the program, but certainly if the safety profile pointed in the same direction, that would be the intention. But right now, there are no patients under the age of 18 who are receiving the drug.
Fantastic, thank you. Okay, we're going to move on to some more specific questions now aimed at the drug and xeroderma pigmentosum specifically. Mm-hmm. So, and again, this is a really good question. Is it anticipated that the treatment will work and provide benefit to all complementation groups? So we know that there are 8 complementation groups, XPA to G, and then the variant. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, the short answer is we don't know.
Okay.
And so that's why we run these clinical programs. So very much the intention of a clinical trial is to try and determine the effect of a product to a particular patient group, in this instance at least. We, based on the evidence that we have, based on the discussions that we've had with experts over quite some time now with regards to xeroderma pigmentosum and DNA repair, we've chosen to focus first on 2 complementation groups. Initially patients with XPC, and then patients with XPV. Once we've got more evidence, once we've got more information, once we've got some results from studies, then we can start looking at what the impact is for those patients, and then what the impact may be for other patients as well.
Can I just ask a follow-up question to that? What was the rationale behind picking those 2 complementation groups? Why were they selected for the focus of this?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, part of this is to do with how you might be able to enroll enough patients into a clinical trial to give you the evidence that you need to ultimately get a drug approved and say, yes, there is a positive risk-benefit profile or benefit-risk profile to this product. And XPC, XPV are obviously more common, relatively speaking, complementation groups within XP. So that's a big factor. The other component that's involved here is really around where we may be able to enroll patients and working with expert physicians who say, yes, I have a patient population. I think it's appropriate to administer the product in a clinical trial to this patient population.
Okay. So the next one is a really important one for many in the community because neurological deterioration is a big impact with XP. I think often there's a lot of focus on the skin and not enough actually on the neurological side of things. So is there a view in terms of whether this treatment could provide therapeutic benefit to patients in terms of neurological aspects of the disease?
Not at this stage. And again, I have to say we don't have any evidence one way or the other. The intention, obviously, of a clinical trial is to try and gather evidence, and that may be something that we can look at in future.
Have clinical studies already been tried in actual AXP patients?
At this stage, we have announced as a company that a single patient has received treatment with afamelanotide. That's an XPC patient. And in that particular patient, the product was well tolerated. We won't be in a position where we can announce every single step of a clinical trial, but where we can, we'll try and keep the community as updated as is humanly possible.
Okay, and to follow on from that, I know confidentiality obviously is an issue, but can you tell us what age range that patient is in and what age range you'll be looking at in the future as the study evolves?
As with the restrictions that we have for the commercial use of the product, the initial focus is on XP patients over the age of 18. So the studies that we plan to run, at least the first studies that we plan to run, will be in adult patients, those above the age of 18.
Okay, thank you. Okay, and we've read on your website that the purpose of the treatment is to make the body produce more melanin, which protects the skin from UV damage. What effect would this treatment have on someone like an XP patient who already has enough melanin?
Yeah, again, it's a good question. One thing that I need to perhaps stress is that is not the only effect of the drug. It's certainly the most visible effect of the drug for those patients who respond in that way. And I should say not every patient who receives the product has that, what we call pandermal darkening of the skin. But we also now understand that afamelanotide and other drugs from the same family of drugs can have other impacts upon skin cells and other cells within the body. What has been shown in laboratory work and what has been shown in preclinical work is that the drug is able to repair DNA. More to the point, it can assist the body's own mechanisms for DNA repair. And so as a result of that work, we're now looking to try and confirm that in both a healthy volunteer study that we're conducting as part of this program and in XP patients.
So I'm going to get technical a little bit here with quite a complicated question. So I'm going to read it just to make sure I get it spot on. So bear with me. Have you checked whether high levels of melanin protect the skin cells genome from the UV-induced photolesions? The molecular defect in the XP patients is different from that of EPP.
Yeah, it's a technical question, but an important one.
Yeah.
What we do understand is that melanin can protect skin from UV-induced photolesions. We also understand that afamelanotide, as I've said, can induce the production, can activate or stimulate the production of melanin. And so as a result, we step through logically the thought process and are trying now to understand and prove in our clinical program that you can actually protect an XP patient.
Fantastic. Next question actually is super important for our community because, as you know, the photoprotection that we use is through the visor, and one of the most difficult things to treat is things like the eyes and the tongue and these sort of smaller areas that sun cream just cannot provide protection for. So a sort of a twofold question here is, one is the treatment topical or infused? And I think you did mention that earlier, but if you can just remind us of that. And then the second is, will it deliver the benefit to areas such as the eyes and the tongue that are not traditional skin cells?
So to the first question, it's neither topical nor infused. It is an injectable, but it's what's called a solid injectable. So it's not a liquid, but it's administered using a slightly wider gauge needle. We can perhaps share a bit more information on the Teddington Trust website with regards to that, I think. In terms of the question around eyes, tongue, these areas, at the moment, it's really too soon to say whether or not we're going to be able to provide any protection there with this particular drug. So unfortunately, I can't answer that one.
Okay, thank you. And just following on from the treatment, how long does the treatment last and how often would it need to be taken? And what is the long-term effectiveness of this? So is this an ongoing lifelong treatment, or is it a case of you do it for a couple of years or months? Can you explain your vision for that a bit?
So to the first part, this really is part of, or one of the areas of focus for this clinical program, is to try and understand how we might use the drug in XP patients. How frequently does it need to be administered? What kind of effect does it have? To the second part, it's very difficult to talk about long-term effect of drugs, regardless of whether that drug has been used for 6 months or a year or even 5 or 6 years. That really is something that we learn about as we go through this program. From our perspective, at least, we have some long-term data in other patient groups, which gives us a level of comfort to then start working with XP patients. And so that's why we're starting this DNA repair program.
Great. So that actually segues us on really nicely to actually move on and discuss CLINUVEL's DNA repair program. So the work of the program. So are there plans? We know that at the moment the clinical trial is happening in Australia. Are there plans to expand this beyond Australia to other territories?
So I want to correct that one because the clinical trial isn't happening in Australia at this point in time. We have other clinical programs which are ongoing in Australia, but not in xeroderma pigmentosum. Once I can share a bit more information on the locations of those studies, I will. But what I will say, and I know that this comes as a bit of a disappointment to your audience, at this point in time, there are no plans to conduct the xeroderma pigmentosum trials in the UK.
Okay, fantastic. And how can we as a charity and as a global community become involved in this study? Is there a pathway for involvement either now or in the future?
So one thing I will say is that we don't recruit patients directly for clinical trials. It's always something that is done through the physicians who are responsible for patient care. So that's very much our approach. In terms of how Teddington Trust can become involved, well, I think this is an important part of that dialogue. You and I have a conversation and we try and make as much information available to the community as we can. That's really important for us. Moving forward, as we announce new trials, certainly that's something that we'll try and provide to the community through Teddington Trust and other groups as well.
Fantastic. Now, I know you mentioned that there isn't plans at the moment to expand it to the UK, so I think that kind of answers this question, but I will mention it, which is, do you intend to involve the UK National XP Service, which operates out of London, or the photodermatology unit in Dundee in any of this future work?
Well, certainly we've worked with both of those units before. They're aware of our work in other indications. At this point in time, there's no plans to involve either of those centres in this initial trial.
Okay, wonderful. And how long, oh, this is a really big question. How long is what we all want to know, isn't it? Do you anticipate it take for this treatment to get from clinical trial to patients? And what does that process look like?
This is a frustrating question for me to answer, regardless of the program that we're talking about. What I will say is this, the focus has to be on safety. Yeah. And so we will take as long as is absolutely necessary to make sure that we can maintain that focus. That being said, I know it doesn't answer the question that you're asking of me. Certainly, we're sitting here in July 2021, and there is a clinical program which is ongoing. We expect to see the first results from that program later this year. Whether they're comprehensive results or partial results, I can't say at this point in time. But that will give us enough information to start sharing as to how long this program may take and what the next steps will be. So I know that doesn't quite answer your question, Nicola. I'm sorry that it's a difficult one for us to answer, but that's where we are.
We're always an impatient community, so thank you for that.
No, I don't think it's about being impatient. I would ask the same question.
Yeah. Okay, so finally, our last question. What will happen after that first clinical report, which is expected later this year, launches, and what will sort of spin out from that data and that information?
Yeah, this first study is a pilot study, and as I said before, the focus is very much on safety. And once we've got data, once we've got results, we sit down with the experts who have been involved in the study, and we look at what we can learn from that data, and then apply those learnings back into the program. So certainly there will be further studies of the product in xeroderma pigmentosum, provided that we continue to see safety.
Thank you so much. I can't tell you how much I appreciate you taking the time. I know it was great when we first spoke, when the press release first went out, there was a lot of interest in the community, and I really do appreciate your time in really drilling down and answering the really important questions that our community have. And also, I really appreciate the fact that you're allowing us the opportunity to revisit this with you as the programme goes, because, obviously our interest is going to continue to grow with that. So really appreciate your time. I'd also like to say a big thank you to all of our community who really took the call to action and came forward with some really excellent questions. So I really appreciate that. And if anyone does want to raise any more follow-up questions or would like to know more, they can email us at support@teddingtontrust.com, and also contact us through all of our social media on Facebook and Twitter at Teddington Trust. So thank you very much.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Nicola. I really appreciate it.
Absolute pleasure.